Welcome back to Open BxRx. The Civilian Complaint Review Board is an independent oversight agency that investigates, mediates, and prosecutes complaints of NYPD misconduct. About 5 years ago, a group of community members introduced a campaign to replace the CCRB with an elected Civilian Review Board in order to put the community first, hold police accountable, and stop police violence. Joining us now to tell us more about the ECRB is Luis Tejada, community organizer. Thank you for joining us, Luis.
Hello, hi Sonyi, thank you for having me. Yes, my name is Luis Tejada. I am a member of the Elected Civilian Review Board campaign, which has been an effort for the last 5 years in which coalition, I myself belong to Freedom Socialist Party, which is one of many coalitions of in this movement of the campaign. And yes, we view that the Civilian Complaint Review Board is ineffective based on its years of existence. And especially at this time, we can see how with the Black Lives Matter movement, this issue about police brutality is alone, is very, has been going on for years. And that's why this group of activists during the Freddie Gray incident, we decided to think of something specific that can hold police officers accountable, and be control, community control of officers who parole our neighborhoods, and that officers should not be above the law, and the police commissioner should not have the final say of disciplining officers.
Right. And Luis, when we talk about what's happening under the current review board, what is happening that's not working, and why do we need an ECRB, especially right now through the civil unrest and COVID-19 crisis?
Yeah, so I'm gonna tell you and everybody who's listening, right? I'm gonna just portray you a statistic from 2017, 3 years ago, that is posted on, the Civilian Complaint Review Board posts their statistic yearly on a yearly basis, and this is from 2017. They received 4,487 complaints, which in my perspective, I'm sure is very low. 33% of those 4,487 complaints were investigated. 5% of those 33% that were investigated were only found valid. And ultimately, when the CCRB made the recommendations, 73% were disregarded by the police department. And at the end, in that year, 0% zero officers were fired as a result of those complaints. So that can just give you a picture of how ineffective, this impartial office, which is supposed to work impartial from the police to investigate civilians' complaint, has a record of not being effective in investigating other complaints. They truncate a majority of civilians' complaint, which is why I believe that in that year, in 2017, and from my experience in doing outreach in the South Bronx, in East New York, in Flatbush, throughout the city, people see the CCRB as a worthless institution that completely, devalues civilian complaints. And the main reason, right, is that the Civilian Complaint Review Board has no power, don't have no binding power after they give due process to the police officer and take all the findings. The board has no final, no final determination of discipline. We have to be witness of police officers like Daniel Pantaleo, who had about 12 complaints to the CCRB, and ultimately we saw on video, how he choked Eric Garner to death, and and plus many other cases that we are now, the people have had enough, and we want real accountability and actual justice.
Right. And Luis, can you tell us the difference between an elected civilian review board versus the Civilian Complaint Review Board?
Yeah, one of the main difference, right, is the first tenant, which will be elected as opposed to the Civilian Complaint Review Board, which receives 5 mayoral appointees, 4 city council appointees, and 3 police commissioners. The commissioner and the board, and the board, the executive board member select 3 board members. So essentially, all the members are appointed versus an ECRB members will be elected within their district. So the way we have done it, we have combined the legislative team of the campaign, 3 adjacent districts to form, one board member constituency, right? So essentially, somebody, people in the community will be able to run for this board position. They have to collect 200 signatures in order to be put on the ballot, and it will be community discussion, community involvement. So that's one of the main difference. The second main difference is that we're calling for in the change to the charter as well, to have that reading in the charter that the police commissioner needs to, by law, follow through on the recommendations that were final after all the investigation by the elected board members. And similar as to the CCRB, you have 3 board members that ultimately write down, based on the evidence, write down the recommendations. The ECRB will also have 3 board members who will work, and after all the private investigation was done, will give now, as opposed to giving a recommendation, they will give their a binding decision that the police commissioner needs to act. And if the 3 members, based on all the information that was gathered, decide to say this officer needs to be fired from the police force, by law, the police commissioner will need to follow through and remove the officer from the NYPD force. And thirdly, we also we know that police officers not only do misconduct, they also commit crimes, and some of those crimes are, as we know, murder as well. The most extreme, choking civilians to death. They should serve time in prison, and that's why we also call for a citywide elected independent special prosecutor who can file, who has all. It acts as a lawyer in New York State, in New York City, and can, separate from the district attorney, which has a very bad, also has a bad history of not holding officers accountable. We feel that also the city, people in New York City should elect an independent special prosecutor, in which will be working in conjunction with the ECRB, with the Elected Civilian Review Board members, to file criminal charges to, police officers that break the law.
Right. And Luis, I also wanted to highlight that the ECRB is looking to involve community members who have also been affected by any type of police brutality as well. Is that correct?
Yes, right. We feel that, the best people that can listen to the complaints, that can make sure that the communities are safe, that the communities are not wrongly surveilled and harassed by the NYPD. Clearly we saw the example with Black and Latino people getting majority of tickets during the COVID burst. There was definitely racism and bias by the NYPD, very clearly. And community people who know their community, who members can easily speak to them, have access to, should be the one, from the campaign's value, should be the one being elected and running for this board position. That's why we have, very importantly, we have made it key to organize within district and to pass this ECRB law to city council, because that's the out of the 3 options, the Charter Revision Commission, which we also participated, but didn't took on our legislation, and the city clerk. We feel that the city council strategy to pass to put forward this amendment, in which then will allow all New York City voters to vote for it. And we are sure that if this legislation is put forward by city council, the majority of New York City will be behind it and will vote yes for it. And we know that there's going to be amazing people running for these positions throughout the city.
Luis, as I said earlier, it's been 5 years in the making. What are some of the challenges and the pushback or opposition to bring this to legislation?
Recent news, the the police commissioner promised, he said, I promised I'm going to follow through on the CCRB recommendations. So, political people in politics, they just want to promise, right? They don't want to make laws. Before the current protests that have been going on for 16 days as of now, there was not a political will within city council to put some legislation like ours on the on the ballot, and there has been critiques about it and saying, oh, the police can take over this board, they have more money. Some political officials have made those type of comments. They also say, oh, the CCRB is working well. It just needs a little bit more reform. But clearly, not only in New York City, right, throughout, in Chicago, in South Carolina, in Florida, also our friends right here in Rochester, many cities are calling for, community control of the police in some, we're not saying in the ECRB campaign that we want to remove the power from the police commissioner to train police officers or to discipline, the police commissioner will have that power. We're just saying that once people make complaints and there's evidence that such police officer acted unnecessarily in that interaction with a civilian, and if there's evidence for it, the appropriate recommendations or discipline should be enforced. And I think there's a movement that we're gonna definitely push as well, besides defund the police, to also that we need to hold the police accountable, and we're gonna be able to fight those conservative forces in city council that don't necessarily want a empower board. They probably will be happy with having an elected board, but they won't want the empower or the elected independent special prosecutor. So we're just going to fight them with massive numbers of people organizing and calling out their city council members to not allow the PBA or any special interest to water down this bill when it becomes introduced.
Thank you, Luis. How can people learn more about the campaign and support and get behind it?
Right now, we have every second Saturday of the month, very accessible meetings via Zoom, which members can find if they go to our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/HopePoliceAccountable. You can also follow us on Instagram.com/HopePoliceAccountable, or also follow our sign our petition on our website, which is stoppoliceViolenceNYC.org. And connect with us. We have a very large pool of volunteers, of campaign members that see this issue very important as a critical one, and families that have lost their sons, their daughters to police brutality. We have activists. So yes, join us and help us be the first city to have such a board with these three key tenets.
Thank you so much for your time today, Luis.
Thank you for having me, Sonyi.
Again, folks, to find out more about the Elected Civilian Review Board, you can visit stoppoliceviolencenyc.org and follow them on Facebook and Instagram at Hold Police Accountable. Open BxRx will be right back.